Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you for stopping by. Today I'd like to take a few minutes to show you guys 10 contextual transitions in EA Sports UFC 3 that you probably don't know about. Now, the first thing we have to do is define what a contextual transition is, and basically, these are transitions that only become available when your opponent makes a move. If you're both in neutral, no one's making a move at all, they will not be available to you, and you won't be able to perform them. So basically, think of them as counters to specific movements your opponent makes. Some of them require some kind of advantage to be able to perform, like a stamina advantage or grapple advantage, and the others are consistent and will always be available to you as long as you're in the right position. So without wasting any time, let's jump right in. Now, the first one we'll look at is pretty simple and something I'm pretty sure high-level players already know. But when you're in full guard and you're the fighter on the bottom, it's very important to pay attention to your hand position, especially if you want to strike from the bottom. One hand is holding on to your opponent's head and the other arm is resting close to your opponent's shoulders. If your opponent tries to posture up from this position, you will have an opportunity to deny it. But if you hit your opponent with the hand holding onto his head, your opponent will be able to posture up instantly and you won't be able to stop him. That's why when you watch good grapplers, you'll notice they always strike from the bottom with the hand that isn't holding the fighter down. So keep that in mind. The second one I want to show you is from full guard postured. When the fighter on the bottom puts their feet on your hips to try to kick you off, you'll notice that a brand new transition called feet on hips is now activated. So if you move quickly and you push up on your right stick as soon as you notice your opponent is trying to kick you off, you'll transition into the standing feet on hips position. And of course, from here, you can immediately go to side control. So it's a pretty good way to counter your opponent's attempt to kick you off and also advance to side control if you can time it right. Next up is from half guard when you're the fighter on the bottom and your opponent is postured up. From here in neutral, you can only get yourself back to full guard. If you go left or if you go right, you can only get back to full guard. But if your opponent starts to advance to side control from half guard postured up, a new transition becomes available to you, and that's the transition to backside. This one does require that you have a significant stamina advantage or a significant grapple advantage. And if you do and you time it right, you can push your right stick in the opposite direction and counter your opponent's attempt to advance to side control by advancing yourself to backside. This one is so rare and so difficult to get that I'm quite confident that a lot of people are not even aware of it. But try it out, and if you're able to actually pull this off in a fight, please send me a clip of it. I'd love to see it. The next one is actually very common online when you watch good players grapple, and this one happens in backside. If you're the fighter on top in backside, your opponent can reverse the position and end up on top of you in backside. A very cool way to counter this reversal is by advancing the side control as they attempt to reverse you. You'll notice that once they begin the reversal attempt, a new transition becomes available to you, and that's the transition to side control. So all you do is hold in whatever direction the prompt is showing you, and you reverse the reversal attempt, and you end up in side control. It's one of the coolest ones in the game for sure, and also one of the most consistent ones. You don't need a stamina advantage, you don't need grapple advantage, and you also don't need to be quick with this one at all. It's just always there for you if you remember to use it. The next one is also from backside when you're the fighter on top. From this position, the fighter on the bottom can easily regain full guard directly from backside. And sure, you can deny this, but if you don't want to deny it, or let's say you forget to deny it for some reason, you can counter their attempt to get back to full guard by stepping over their hip, and that puts you in half guard. You do this by pushing to your right, and when you do this, the transition to full guard won't complete and you end up in half guard. It's pretty cool. I really like this one, and I personally use this one a lot because I find it difficult for some reason to consistently deny that full guard transition. So this is sort of a saving grace for me, and if you're not already using it, it might help to add it to your game for sure. The next one takes you from a powerful position to a less powerful position. but I'm gonna include it anyways because it's just flat out cool. This one happens in full mount if you're the fighter on top. Your opponent can give up his back by going to back mount. Now, if for some reason you don't want to be in back mount on top, you can push your right stick in the opposite direction as soon as your opponent begins to move, and you'll step out of full mount and end up in backside. Like I said, it takes you from a powerful position to a less powerful position, but hey, maybe you want to go for a submission from backside. Or maybe you're just very good at holding backside and doing damage from there. Maybe that's what you want to do. This is a very good, quick, and efficient way to get you from mount to backside without even having to fill a bar. I like this one. I think it's pretty cool. The next one I'm going to show you begins in back mount, and this one is for players that really don't want to take any damage on the ground, even if it means potentially ending up in a position where it's easier to hold you. When you find yourself on the bottom in back mount, most players would immediately try to flatten you out, and once you're flattened out, you can take quite a bit of damage. Now you can block that attempt to flatten you out for sure, but if you want to get out of back mount completely and get to a position that would at least result in you taking less damage, you'll notice that when they begin the attempt to flatten you, a new transition becomes available to you, and that's the transition to back sit-in. Sure, back sit-in is easier to hold, but you don't take a lot of damage here, and you can go to backside from back sit-in and potentially either make your way back to your feet in the back clinch or even get back directly to full guard. This one right here is very useful to me as a striker because when I get taken down, honestly, I don't care if you're laying on me at all. I just want to avoid damage on the ground, and this really helps with that. Now, remember the transition I showed you? The counter to an opponent's attempt to get back to full guard from backside? This next one is very similar to it, except this time it's the fighter on the bottom trying to counter a transition. When you're on the bottom in backside and your opponent tries to take your back, you'll notice a new transition becomes available, and that's the transition to half guard. If you have grapple advantage or stamina advantage, you can immediately counter, and rather than end up in back mount bottom, the fighter on top ends up in half guard top. Pretty cool. Now, if you don't have some kind of advantage, whether it be stamina advantage or grapple advantage, and you try to use this counter, you try to get to half guard as the opponent on top tries to get to back mount, the fighter on top will counter your counter by flipping you over into back sit-in, which is probably the coolest contextual transition in the whole entire game. I really love this one. As always, we save the best for last. This one is very specific and requires a lot to go right before you can even get it, which makes it possibly the rarest contextual transition in the whole entire game. First, you gotta have a fighter that can do it. Second, you gotta have stamina advantage. And third, you gotta be near the cage, in full guard, and postured up. When the fighter on the bottom goes to kick you off, you'll notice that the side control transition becomes available, but only to one side, and that's the side near the cage. So you hold your stick towards that side, and your fighter will transition using the cage, Jacare style. I think it's absolutely incredible and just shows how deep this ground game actually is, and also how much potential it actually has. You have all these incredible contextual transitions in the game, and they barely get used. A lot of players, even high-level players, aren't even aware of most of these because the ground game is all about faking transitions and denying transitions. I want to see more of this. When I watch high-level grappling matches, I want to see this stuff. It's way too cool and innovative to remain hidden like this. My goal with this video is to bring attention to it. If you've never used or even seen these, well, now you know. I didn't even know about most of them till I started specifically looking for them, and this has resulted in newfound respect for the deep, brilliant, innovative, and realistic aspects of the ground game in EA Sports UFC 3. And my only hope is that you guys love these as much as I do, and we get to see it expanded further in the future.